How are you doing? Today it is time for my June wrap up. I kind of throughout the month of June consistently felt on the edge of a reading slump. I didn't fully fall into one, but I just felt like I was on the border of it the entire month. So I didn't read as much as I typically do, but I still managed to read a good amount. So I'm very excited to talk to you about it. Also, apologies for any background noise, but I do have a fan on. It is quite hot, so I apologize. But let's talk about all the books I read in June, starting off with my stats. So I read 8 books this month, which amounted to 2,890 pages, which is an average of 261.25 pages per book and an average of 96.33 pages per day. I've finished 0 series and I also DNF'd to a book, so that's there. For format, I have 2 books I own, 1 ebook, 3 galleys from that gallery, and 2 library books. For rating, we have 2 2-stars, 4 3-stars, 1 4-star, 1 5-star, an average rating of 3.12, which is painful, I have to say. Then for age range, we have 2 YA books, 1 new adult book, 5 adult books. And then for genre, we have 6 contemporaries, 1 dystopian, and 1 mystery book. So there you go. The first book that I read in June is This Time It's Real by Ann Liang, which I gave 2 to 5 stars to. I had heard so many great things about this author, so when I saw this book in my library, I decided to check it out. And honestly, I kind of felt fine about it. I do have to say that I liked it enough to check out more about this author, so there's that. If you have any recommendations on where to go next for this author's backlist, let me know in the comments. But while reading this, I thought it was a fine read. It was a very fun contemporary romance YA. It had fake dating in it. I like that element to it. I thought the romance was cute. I also like our main character's kind of like personal journey. The love interest is also a famous actor in this book, so I like the kind of different discussions around fame as well. It's just that, you know, a month has passed and I barely remember anything about this book, so I feel like a 3-star is a solid rating because of that. Then next I read Watch Me by Tahereh Mafi, which I gave 4 to 5 stars to. This is the first book in a spin-off series to the Shadow Me series, taking place 10 years after, following different characters. And considering I didn't really like the last 3 books in the original Shadow Me trilogy, I was a bit hesitant to get into the series, but I also was very curious considering just how much time in world had passed. And I have to say, I had so much fun with this so unexpectedly, because like I said, I wasn't expecting much from this, but I honestly thought this was a really interesting direction to take the world in, and I really enjoy our 2 leads. And overall, I just flew through this book, had such a blast, and enjoyed my time so much that it was all worth it for me. I do have to say that this first book definitely felt like a setup book, like just situated as I get into this world, kind of setting up the different things we're going to be doing in the series. So therefore it wasn't a 5-star, because I feel like a book needs to be a little bit more than just a setup. But I am very, very intrigued to see where it is going to take us in the future. Then next I read Problematic Summer Romance by Ali Hazelwood, which I gave out of 5 stars. This is Ali Hazelwood's newest release, and you know I'm always here when Ali Hazelwood releases something, and this was no exception. Although I do have to say this is a spin-off book to None in Love, which is my least favorite Ali Hazelwood, so I was a bit hesitant getting into this one, especially because it's also an age gap romance, which again is not typically my favorite thing. But I do have to say, I love this. Obviously, I gave it a 5-star. I adored Maya, the main character, right off the jump. I feel like she's a bit different from your typical Ali Hazelwood protagonist, but I really enjoyed that. I really liked the way she was written. I feel like she felt very confident and like bold, and I really liked that about her, and I just immediately fell in love with her. I also really liked the cast of side characters. Of course, most of them we already know from None in Love, but just the way we expanded on different dynamics within this book was really fun, and I really like that. And then I also really love the setting that this book takes place in. It's a destination wedding book, so I really like that vibe, like the different activities we want to do in this book. In the end, Ali Hazelwood mentions that this is her love letter to Sicily. That's very obvious, because just the location is such a big element of this book as well, and I really love that. I do have to say that when it comes to the romance and the love interest, it did have to grow on me a bit throughout this book. I wasn't immediately sold from it. This book also has some flashbacks. I'm very ready to do the flashbacks. I got it. I saw what was there. I saw the tension, I saw the romance, I saw what Maya saw in this guy, but then in the present timeline I was just like, he's kind of an ass. What are we doing? But as the book kind of continued, and in the flashbacks we see more of his past that explains more of his actions, in present day, but then also as in the present timeline he starts to open up more. I have to say he's still not my favorite love interest, but I definitely loved the romance, and I saw the connection there. I saw why they had going on what they had going on, and I just couldn't help but just completely root for them. And yeah, this book had me giddy by the ending, and I ended up absolutely loving it. And this was kind of where things start to go downhill for a month, because next I read Nobody in Particular by Sophie Gonzales, which gives it 5 stars to as a guy I got from NetGalley. If you've been around here, you know I adore Sophie Gonzales's works. She's just one of my favorite authors, and I was so excited for this book because it sounded right up my alley. And as you can tell by the star rating, I didn't like it. Give this rating a star of promising. I really liked the setup. I liked the banter between our two main characters. I thought everything we had going on was interesting. Just the more the book continued, the less I liked it, because I felt like the romance was extremely underdeveloped. I felt the characters were extremely unlikable. It felt just so overdramatic, and at a certain point the romance also became so codependent and like slightly toxic. And there was a character that calls out like, hey, maybe you are too codependent on each other. They just dog shit on her because of that, and I was like, no, she has a point. Maybe you should chill a little. So yeah, there was just so many things that I didn't like, and on top of that also just I was a bit bored by this book as well. I feel like not a whole lot happened in it. And then when it comes to the kind of like villains in this book, there's no real villains, it's contemporary. We do have some antagonists. They felt so cartoonish. I wasn't a big fan, and then also some of the reveals didn't really make sense. There were so many plot holes towards the ending, and I don't know. I really wasn't a big fan. There are elements to it that I did like, hence why it's not a 1 star, but it's hard to focus on those considering just how much of a disappointment this book was to me. Then next I read Backahnded Compliments by Katie Chandler, which gives you the 5 stars too, and is another guy I got from NetGalley. This one sounded a lot of fun to me because it has soulmates in it. It's a just regular contemporary romance, but it does have a speculative element where almost everyone in this universe has a name on their wrist, and that's the name of their soulmate, and once they touch for the first time, that name kind of like, that mark solidifies, and they know that's my soulmate. And I really love that element of this book. I'm not going to tell you too much about my fanfic history because that's none of your business, but I love soulmate AUs. So I was very excited to read this book because of that element to it, and that element definitely didn't disappoint. I thought it was really interesting, especially because, as I mentioned before, some people, like most people have soulmates, and that means some people don't. And there's also some discussions around that I thought were really interesting. And then also just one of our main characters is very focused on wanting to choose love instead of just going with someone because they're your soulmate, and kind of like the discussions around that, like choosing your love while also having a soulmate, how that works, I thought was very interesting. And there's also a certain scene where they go to see historical sites, and they mention like speculations about like soulmates and like blah blah blah, and I thought all of that was also really interesting. And seeing how, even though it's like such a small part of the book, just seeing how having soulmates affects kind of like the history that we already know, because it's our history as well, because it's set in modern day. I like those elements to it a lot. But when it came to the romance, I thought it was very incel love. I thought it was very boring and very dragged out, which sounds so contradictory, incel love and very dragged out, but that's the case. And like the conflict between them was just like the same thing over and over and over again, and it got so boring so quickly. And then I don't know, I felt like this whole book was just kind of dragging a little bit. Then next I read Reading It With You by Pons, which I give 2 to 5 stars to, as a guy from NetGalley. This was a really fun one. This was honestly, I read this at a time where it felt like the reading slump was this close. It had already been coming closer, but if this book went badly, I would have jumped me off. And it's a 3 star, so it's not like it went fantastically, but while I was reading it, I read it very quickly, I had a good time, and that kind of saved me from going full reading slump, so I appreciate this book for that. But I do have to say that when it comes to like other elements and like looking at things a bit more critically, I did have some issues with it. For example, I thought the romance again was underdeveloped. It's apparently something that just the theme of this month, I guess. But I thought the romance was a bit underdeveloped. I thought the 2 characters were very distinctive, especially when it comes to their narrative voices, because the dual POV. I find them so hard to distinguish from each other, which should not be the case considering from what we're told they're supposed to be very different people. And I really loved reality TV show element, but I feel like in the second half we kind of forgot that was a part of it, and any conflict I found so stupid. So ultimately I'd let it on a 3 star, but from all of the 3 stars I have this month, I would recommend this one the most. Then next I read Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, which I give 2 to 5 stars to. This is Emily Henry's latest release, although it's been a couple of months, but I've seen so many mixed reviews coming in, and from reviewers that I typically share opinions with, those have all been negative. So I was very hesitant to get started on this book, but this month I just bit the bullet and I read it, and I'm so conflicted on this book. I totally get why it's all over the spectrum ratings wise, but basically this is unpopular, I know, but I loved the kind of litfic elements to this book. When it comes to Margaret and Alice, our main character, those storylines I thought were so interesting. I really loved learning more about Margaret's life and her history, and seeing kind of the way she experienced things in contrast with how they were portrayed in the media. I thought was so interesting. And then also there are some parallels between Margaret and Alice's lives, despite the fact that they're so different people, but there are some parallels in their lives, and I thought that was also really interesting. I thought Alice's personal journey, and especially her relationship with her mom, was very interesting in this book. So I loved all of that, which I know most people thought was extremely boring while reading this book, but I fucking love that, and that's honestly the making of a new favorite Emily Henry. It would just had focus on that for me. But sadly enough, this is a romance. I don't know what I was after discussion around that. This is so clearly a romance, and it pains me because the romance was terrible. I did not like a love interest. I feel like he just was what he was supposed to be in function of the scene he was in, rather than like an actual fully realized character, which just pissed me off, but also made it so hard to get a grasp on him. And considering Alice and Margaret are such fleshed out characters, it doesn't just pale in comparison. Again, this is another very underdeveloped type of romance, and I just did not see it. I did not see the chemistry. I was so bored every time we were spending time with just the 2 of them. Like, I did not care at all about this relationship. So there's that. And that has already brought us to the final book that I read in June, which is Maid by Nita Prose, which I give 2 to 5 stars to. How do I talk about this book? Because I find it so hard to discuss this, because our main character Molly is very neurodivergent coded without actually being diagnosed as neurodivergent anywhere on the pages. But it's very much heavily implied that she's supposed to be at least autistic, but I also presume the author was making an attempt at OCD representation. And I find this really hard to discuss those topics, considering I'm neither autistic nor do I have OCD. So obviously I'm not going to be the most knowledgeable person on these things, but just based on my knowledge on things and my experience reading this book, I just felt like Molly was a very poor caricature of both of these neurodivergencies, rather than, you know, an actual person, and that made her very aggravating to read. On top of that, I also just thought she was a very selfish character. Like, she was raised with very strong principles and etiquette, which I understand, but what I didn't like about Molly is that she very much forced those things on other people and then did not hold herself to the same standards. There were several times in this book where she called someone a bad person for doing something, and I was just like, you just did the same thing 5 minutes ago. I'm supposed to think you were in the right, but this person is in the wrong for doing the exact same thing. And then on top of that, another frustration I had is that she very often went into situations with an idea in her head of what that situation was going to be, and then twisted everything within that situation to fit her ideal. And then when later on something was like revealed or said that goes with like what was going on in her head, basically she goes, oh my god, no. And I'm like, yes, of course that was what going on, like, oh my god. And I know that wasn't an attempt to, again, try and make Molly's worldview different, because that's the whole thing. We keep getting beat over the head with that she's different than other people, because Nita Prose is not subtle about that, despite not actually putting the label on Molly. Like, I don't know, like, if you have to twist everything in a situation in very strong ways to fit your narrative, maybe you're just delusional, not neurodivergent, because that's not what neurodivergent people do. They might not be able to read a room, but they at least know the actual room they're in. So therefore, I find Molly an insufferable main character, and the first half of this book is basically just Molly and her monologuing, because nothing happens in the first half. Like, absolutely, the inciting incident happens and then nothing happens. And then about halfway through we kind of get more into the mystery, and that's when I really started enjoying this book. Before that I thought it was a bit of a slog because Molly's so insufferable and we have nothing else going on besides Molly. But once you get more into the mystery and the side characters become a bit more of a prominent part of this book and you kind of get a bit more into like fun family feelings, I really started to enjoy this book. And I also think that towards the ending Molly does go to a bit more of growth that makes me very excited to actually continue on reading this series despite me not really liking this first book. But yeah, I had fun in the second half. I really did not in the first half. And then I do have to say that like the ultimate big reveal I found incredibly stupid. But yeah, there you go. Those are my thoughts on the Maid by Nita Prose. And that's all my thoughts on all the books that I read in June. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments what you thought of any of these books, if you read them, as well as some of the books you read in June, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Good.
Here I am again, the same old situation.